Welcome back to Sustainability Mindshift, where we are exploring what it takes to be a sustainability leader today, including the skills, capabilities, and specifically the mindsets that are critical for success. I'm your host, Brad Pierce, and I am very fortunate to have Lorna Davis here with us today. Hey, Lorna.
Hey, Brad.
Nice to have you here. I'm going to just tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we're going to jump right in. Lorna Davis is a highly sought-after speaker and coach who is passionate about bringing indigenous wisdom into business and helping leaders live and lead with love. She currently serves on several boards, including the Social Mission Board of Seventh Generation, the Advisory Board of Radicle Impact, the Board of Guayaki, which is a great drink. I love the Guayaki drink, and the Board of B Lab Global. In the past, she has served in various executive roles, including as president of multinational consumer goods companies Danone, Kraft and Mondelez. Notably, while serving as CEO and chairwoman of Danone North America, Lorna led the company's purpose journey, including establishing the $6 billion company as a public benefit corporation in 2018 and making it the largest B Corp in the world, which is really exciting. She has lived and worked in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, UK, France, China, and the USA. She clearly loves travel and international experiences, and she's deeply committed to wildlife conservation, especially protecting rhinos from poachers. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but I'd love to jump right in, Lorna, and I'm going to kick it off. You know, I watched your TED Talk on radical interdependence, and I noticed it's been viewed by over 2 million people. That's a lot of views. So it clearly resonates with people, and I'd like to start and talk about that, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think when somebody asked me to speak about what I was passionate about, I started the journey to kind of craft my speech, if you like. And first of all, what I think was hilarious now that I think back on it is my entire speech was about radical interdependence. And as I was developing that speech, the number of times that I would come with my latest draft to the TED team and present it with great enthusiasm, and then they would give me a lot of input and feedback. And I was not all that happy to hear that feedback because it was my speech. And the irony, of course, was not lost on me that sometimes interdependence and collaboration doesn't flow quite as smoothly as you think. But I think that the idea that we can't achieve anything big or interesting on our own is the thing that matters the most to me. We can do a lot of small things. We can do a lot of things that give us a personal sense of achievement. But if we're trying to solve the challenges that the world is facing today, zero chance of doing it alone, any of us.
And it sounds like from what you're saying too, zero chance of doing it with a sense of too much pride and ego getting in the way. And that's what you were feeling and experiencing in that process of getting feedback from TED.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I think is important here is not to demonize the sort of heroic side of us. We all have that, and in fact, if we didn't have a sense of self-importance, our lives would be difficult, right? We need to feel a sense of achievement when we, from little kids, learn to tie our own shoelaces and, learn to do things that matter to us. But I think it's important that sense of self-importance is seen in perspective. And one of the points that I try to make in my talk, and I've tried to make many times since, is that one of the unintentional mistakes that we make, I think, when we want to take credit for something, is that actually we set ourselves up at the very beginning for a small goal. And so we create a plan for something, or we create a goal where we can sort of imagine it happening and imagine how happy we'll be when it's done. And the problem with that is inevitably it creates something quite small. And if we actually take a step back and look at what we really are moved to influence or to make happen, we will not know how to get there. I often talk about miracles, and people have asked me. I have been deeply influenced by a man called Michael Neal, who talks about miracles a lot. And people have asked, what's the difference between a miracle and a goal? And frankly, a miracle is one where you actually acknowledge that there's an entire universe that we're operating in, where all sorts of extraordinary things happen that we don't understand. And a goal is generally something that we've kind of made really small and neat and tidy. And it's cool, but it's not going to change the world.
You think that's a little bit of, fear of failure that's built in? I mean, I know I've heard, I can't remember who told me one time, but it really struck a chord with me when they said that we've been taught to be right our entire lives. You sit in class and preschool even, and the teacher says, what's the answer to this? And, you raise your hand and you want to be the one to get it right. And you're ashamed if you get it wrong. And so the need to be right is it's built into us. It's entrenched in us. And similarly, I think what I'm hearing you say, the fear of failure and looking bad. So setting small goals that we can achieve actually is very human.
Yeah, it is. And I think bless us. We're so sweet doing these kinds of things. And I think somebody said to me the other day, that it's actually fear and fame that get in the way. So, we're afraid of being wrong or making mistakes, and we want to be famous. We want to take credit. And again, it's very natural and very, very much a part of the human experience. And a more highly evolved part of the human experience is to cooperate with others to achieve really interesting and important goals. Mm-hmm. And so I think we can do both, and we can all, in all of our lives, there can be, things in areas where we want to be right and we want to be important. It's great. But for what you're up to, which is to shift the way that you think about sustainability, the way you think about our use of the resources, both physical and human, of this planet, our sort of higher order consciousness is required. Otherwise, I think we can kind of see where the other kind of consciousness got us. It's like here, Yeah. So I think we can call on a different part of ourselves.
So that's interesting. So, a big question that we ask here in this show is it's a big question, but the how. Everybody wants to know, how do we do it? It's easy for us to talk about what we need to do, and consciousness is clearly becoming something that we're all aware of, that we need higher levels of consciousness to achieve success and sustainability, and more importantly, have life thrive in the future. So you mentioned, for example, two different ways of being, the hero and the interdependent leader in the conversation. So let's sort of maybe juxtapose those two characters for a little bit. And then eventually I'd love to, again, shift the conversation also toward, how then do we become interdependent leaders and take on some of the characteristics that you identify as being critical for that.
So I heard a hilarious riddle the other day, which comes to my mind. So I'm going to say it anyway, because I think it's relevant for the how-to question. So the question is, how do you get down from an elephant? And if I ask you, how do you get down from an elephant? Generally, people say things like, well, you slide down the trunk, or you put a ladder up, or whatever. And the answer is, you don't get down from an elephant, you get down from a duck. Because, of course, you get down from a duck. For those people who didn't get it, I look forward to hearing how long it took you to work it out. The interesting point about the riddle is, when we ask a how-to question, we've already decided the framework. We've already decided in our little heroic mind what we're going to be up to. and we create our little plan. And then we very quickly, just as you say in school, we learned how to be right. We learned how to do the right. We learned to do plans, neat little plans designed to solve a problem that we've decided is the right one. In this case, getting down from an elephant.
A woolly mammoth, maybe.
Exactly, a woolly mammoth. If you have a broader group of people in the conversation early enough, you've got a much better chance of working out what it is you're actually trying to do. And then you're basically in the journey, on the journey of working together to figure out kind of how to take the next step and the next step and the next step. And you're very unlikely to have a beautiful map laid out in front of you. It's likely to be a much more twisty map than that. But it's a journey that matters. I think one of the things that the reason that I picked this kind of metaphor is that with the heroic mindset, which says, I'm going to pick something that I know I can achieve. I know I can get the credit. I've decided what the question is. I'm going to create the plan. We have an illusion of progress. We have an illusion of action. We have an illusion of success. But we're often answering a question that's not interesting. It's not the right question. It's often not an inclusive question. If we really settle into the bigger question of what we're actually dreaming about, hoping for, wanting, it's much more visceral, kind of a desire. It's a much more kind of uncertain process with many more people required to be engaged in the game. I mean, a lot of people who are listening to this are parents. I happen not to be a parent, but I do like parenting as a metaphor, because parenting is the ultimate job of uncertainty. This little kid arrives in your life, your heart is overflowing with complete adoration. And then you begin a lifelong journey of short-term, long-term trade-off, uncertainty, ambiguity, moments of success, moments of despair, lots of stakeholders, including the other parents, the grandparents, the friends, the other kids. It's what humans do. It's the most important job, arguably, that a human being does in their life, and we do it with all of its uncertainty because it matters to us. The goals keep changing, the KPIs are not clear. It's a thing.
Yes.
It's exactly the same as sustainability, right? It's a thing. And if you said when your kid was born, okay, 3 KPIs, everybody who, I presume people know what KPIs are, but key performance indicators, 3 KPIs and the kid turns 21, this is the SAT score, this is the height, this is the weight, everybody would laugh because it's ridiculous. It's the same here. I mean, we are trying to save this magnificent planet. All of you who have children are hoping that you're going to lead, you're going to use your precious life to make a difference to this extraordinary planet. If anybody thinks that that's an easy job, well, they're clearly, they're not thinking, right? It's not an easy job. So we take it step by step, bit by bit, with deep humility, and we get as many people engaged as possible early on in the right way. I mean, it's not a, you don't get an auditorium, but you get a big group of relevant people, and you take it one step at a time.
So it sounds like, I mean, you've held these positions where, you've been responsible for quite a lot, being CEO of Danone North America. That's a lot to take on your shoulders. And yet you were able to lead the company toward the B Corp status, which I'm sure had some pushback from people because it was an uncertain future from their perspective. They're thinking, what's the value of this? Where is it going to get us? And why are we investing time and resources in this?
Yeah. And one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this work is I'm noticing I spend a lot of my time speaking with big companies about their sustainability journey. Some of them want to be B Corps, some of them want to be public benefit corporations, some of them not, but they're doing different things. And in general, I'm seeing a pattern, which is that you often have a very visionary CEO. Generally, the person's got to the top of their particular tree. They've now got the opportunity to think more broadly. Almost always beneath them is a layer of what I call permafrost, people who are incredibly resistant, often very annoyed by the CEO who is off, making speeches at the United Nations or whatever, while I'm delivering the numbers and doing all of the work, because it's hard, right, to balance. And then you've got an entire group of younger people who are up for it. They're fresh. They don't have the same attachment to the power structures of the past. They're much more flexible and malleable in their thinking and their solutions. And they've got the solutions. And the same was true in Danone North America for me. When we were talking about how we were going to get certification, where our gaps were, where our upsides were, it was the young people that held us to account. Young people who said, how are we going? We were closing a factory in a very difficult state. And I remember a young woman in the HR department saying, what's the B Corp way to close the factory and to treat the workers appropriately? And she would never have had the permission to, in an old-fashioned structure, to ask that question. I was momentarily annoyed because I didn't have the answer to the question. So the hero in me was kind of annoyed. And then the next sort of thought I had was, oh, thank goodness she asked that question, because we need to find the answer out. And so the young people in your organization are the ones who are going to help you to get there. Because we're all wherever we are, right? Even the permafrost layer, I have enormous compassion for that. I've had many conversations with people at that age who are saying, I don't understand. I've spent my whole life, following a path, looking after my children, trying to be a good parent. And now the rules have changed. Trying to be a good leader, trying to be a good professional. And I don't know that I'm up for the changes. I mean, a lot of people, even my age, I when my mobile phone doesn't work or does something that I don't like, which I've decided means it doesn't work, I look around for the youngest person that I can find. And I say, can you help me? And then the young person generally grabs the phone, also doesn't know what they're doing, but picks it up and starts doing something and then escaping whenever it doesn't take them where they wanted to go, and then solve the problem and give the thing back to me. We are all struggling with different things that we think we understand, like how do you get down from an elephant? The more stakeholders we have to support us, the better. And I do think that the example I just gave you about the mobile phone is useful, because I come from a generation where you're supposed to know the answer before you started doing stuff. So, for example, I'm sort of scared to go into my phone or my computer and start messing about in case I make a mistake and mess it up. And so I'm much less exploratory. I kind of tend to go down pretty traditional paths, and you're nodding, you probably do too. Your kids don't, right? Your kids pick up the phone and they start stabbing numbers and everything, knowing that there's very little damage that they can do. They back out of stuff that's not working, and then they try another angle. And I think that's exactly how it works. Okay, I'm going to reduce carbon in my company by 25% by the end of the year. I don't know how to do that. Let's go. Let's see what we can do. Person goes down that track. Oh, that's not going to work. Back up. Let's go down this track. I mean, it's much more fun than trying to map the thing out in advance.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard. I mean, I'm sure you'd agree with this. It's hard because there's a lot of risk. Companies don't like taking risk, especially, like financial institutions, for example. They might want somebody else to try something out first. And to sort of find out where the risks and opportunities are. So, and I agree that it's important for leaders to take that jump, that leap, into the unknown and the creative. You use the team you have and the stakeholders you have to get a diversity of perspectives to co-create. but that's a lot to ask, companies that are on a fast pace and churning stuff out. There's a lot of urgency involved every day, day in, day out,
Well, I got to say, I it's a lot to ask. And also, what the hell? Here we are. We've got so many, we delude ourselves. I mean, the planning process is hilarious to me. We spend days planning imaginary futures and trying to get super precise about stuff we don't know will happen. Yes, you have to do some planning to get some, allocation of resources. I get it. But honestly, if you look at the amount of made up energy that we put into planning made up futures in comparison to like where we could be spending that time, I mean, I just encourage the people who are listening to this to just experiment with that. So I do think that we often delude ourselves into precision and accuracy and clarity, which is just not true. We think we're right, but we just made up stuff. That's one thing. And the second thing is, honestly, Brad, you can see I get a bit upset about this because I've spent so many years of my life people trying to get precise about answers that we don't have and will never have. And so let's stop with the pretending. And the second thing is I'm a big fan of pilots. I mean, we have this tendency to sit on our butts until we've got it right in the plan conceptually. And then we start. And again, if I'm going to come back to being human, when your little kid learns to walk, what does your kid do? All of you who've got kids, if you haven't got kids, other people's kids, they don't sit there and kind of create a strategy that they're going to work out until they've figured out exactly how to get to the cookie on the other side of the room without falling over. No, they stumble in the general direction that they want to go, and then they fall over, and then they try it again and they fall over, they try it again, they fall over, they try it again, they fall over, until eventually they make it to the other side of the room and they get the cookie. That's how humans work. That's how we learn. That's how we become human. That's how we learn to talk. That's how we learn to walk. That is how we are going to learn to solve the challenges of the world. And so let's just stop pretending that that's not how we work,
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great example, and it makes me think though of so leaders attempting to try stuff out it's got to be very hard for leaders, especially that permafrost layers you're talking about that are reporting up to the CEO or up to the C-suite, and then they've got their direct reports, and so they're kind of squeezed in the middle there. And the fear of losing your job, fear of looking bad, all the stuff we've talked about, combined with the fact that they're operating within systems oftentimes that are unfortunately crumbling all around us. These old systems that are outdated and not working for us and the planet anymore. And so to practice, you gave the example of a child. They're going to do everything they can to get to that cookie. They're going to stumble. They're going to get back up. They're going to grab onto the side, to the chair. But to have that flexibility to practice different ways of being, it's got to be a challenge. How did you overcome some of that stuff when you in your own career?
Well, I'll tell you that, I mean, it's interesting that it's so funny when I hear people read out my bio, I think, gosh, I did do a lot of traveling. One of the advantages about living in other countries was I could try stuff in other countries far away from head office and then play with, under the radar. And I thought that was kind of fun. In fact, my least fun job was being in the US when I was running the North American Mondelez biscuit business, because my boss was like here. So I was like right under her nose. I didn't like that nearly as much as when I was in China and I could do whatever I liked. But I do think that creating a little, some companies call it a skunk works, to prove stuff out is really useful. When people come to me and say, how do I begin this journey? Mm-hmm. I generally say a couple things. First is take a couple of your youngest, most passionate, most nothing to lose people and put them in charge of the project. And do, for example, back of the envelope assessment of B Corp. If for those of you who don't know about B Corp, even if you don't become a B Corp, go on bcorporation.net, and there's a thing called a B Impact Assessment, and it's free. Have a look at how your organization does on those scores. It's really an interesting set of questions that you need to ask yourself as a company. So that's the first thing. Get a young person to sort of start to do some sort of, assessment of the organization. Secondly, talk to the people outside your organization and look for allies. People upstream from you, your suppliers, people downstream from you, your customers, and people like your investors and so on. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a very big bank in America, in Britain, and they wanted to become a B Corp. They've subsequently become a B Corp, which is, I'm pleased to say. And I was having a conversation with them before they began the journey a couple of years back. And they had exactly the same thing. Visionary CEO, resistant senior management. That person had given the job to a sort of, mid-30s young woman to lead the program. And in the conversation that we were having about how she was going to kind of mobilize the organization, it became apparent that a number of their high-profile clients, because they were private banks, so they had a lot of these, rich, famous people, a lot of those high-profile clients would be willing to take their money away from that bank and give it to a bank that had a better reputation. Because those people felt, responsible for where their money was sitting. And so this young woman developed a sort of a customer-focused allyship, which she then used to go back to her management and say, these extremely important customers want us to become the kind of company that they want to bank with. And they have told us that these are the kinds of things they're looking for in a bank, and these are the kinds of things that we'll get if we pursue B Corp certification, and so on. I remember when I was at Danone North America, and even at Mondelez, Walmart's sort of, sustainability efforts around recycling, around, supply chain, put an enormous amount of pressure on us. Because we were downstream from them, and they said to us, if you don't, answer all of these questions, we're not going to buy from you anymore. We're not going to give you as much shelf space. So in that way, we were upstream from them. In that way, they were a really big help for us, because I was able to say to my boss, Walmart is asking us of this. And if Walmart, who's not really known as the world leader in sustainability historically, they certainly, weren't in those days, then we need to do it. So I think you need to look for allies and support outside of your organization, rather than spending all of your time looking at each other, and look for it in unexpected places. So, for example, one of the things that I don't think we do enough of in the US is we don't talk enough about legislation. If you look at smoking, one of the reasons that smoking took such a big dive is because legislation was introduced that stopped people smoking. And
you're talking about like not in restaurants and stuff like that. It kind of stopped. You cut the places they can smoke.
Indeed.
Planes.
And so exactly. So if you could, if the jurisdiction in which you operate insists that you, insists that you do something about emissions or recycling or whatever your business happens to be, that's terrific. It forces your organization to do it. It forces all your customers to do it. So how about lobbying your local government and asking them to put in place legislation that supports your sustainability goals? It's not the place that American companies generally go. They tend to see the government kind of as an enemy, which is a pity. But I think it's a great idea.
Government can play a really important role in the whole stakeholder ecosystem. I think that's a great message, that you need to understand, first of all, your stakeholder ecosystem, and then look for solutions in unexpected places. I like that. Let's switch gears a little bit too, as we're wrapping up here. I'd love to actually just get a little personal with you, and speaking of ecosystems and your passion for rhinos and wildlife conservation. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, that's that's a challenge today, for example, of people looking at rhino horns as being valuable, and then not, valuing the horns clearly over the life of the creature and the role that creature plays in the ecosystem. Let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Well, it's a great example for me of heartbreak and insight for me. So first of all, I've been really clear about the fact that it breaks my heart to see the slaughter of rhinos, and I went through a phase of so much anger and hatred, frankly, for the people all through the chain. The people who use it, who think that it's a status symbol, who think that it's good for their health, the people who traffic it, who use the same trafficking systems as drugs and arms, and then the people who do the killing itself. And in my journey of the last years, I've had to really get to understand all of the people in this process, the misunderstandings and the economic realities of many of the people in the process. So you've got people, for example, in Vietnam and China who misunderstand health and have beliefs about horn. And while I don't agree with them, I have to understand that it looks to them that rhino horn might cure cancer or make them feel better or whatever, or make them feel important in the light of their customers, in the face of their customers or their friends. And while I don't agree with them, it's really important I understand it. If I look at, for example, the people who are actually doing the killing, these are people who, particularly in the light of COVID, have lost jobs and are getting, they don't have many alternatives. And so the lesson for me for this conversation is, generally in all conversations, you need credibility, logic, and empathy, all three of these ingredients. Like in this particular talk, you wouldn't have invited me if I didn't have some apparent credibility in the space. Nobody would be listening if I weren't somewhat logical. But I will not move anybody unless there's some empathy between you and me, and between me and them and me and them and you, and so on. And understanding the perspectives of the humans around us is the most important single ingredient in this game. Being curious about how it looks to another person is the beginning, really, of the process of transformation of our lives and of the planet. And from a place of empathy, I don't need to agree, but from a place of empathy, I'm able to act. And even though my heart breaks, and even though I feel hopeless sometimes because I haven't been able to solve the problem, I have made some difference. I'm doing some things. I'm, in my own way, trying to contribute. And it keeps me humble, man. Brad, every time I think that I'm achieving anything, I return to that space and I notice, how much has yet to be achieved, and the likelihood that I will die without having solved the problem. It's humbling and important. And I don't want to immunize myself from that heartbreak, because that's part of what it is to be a human on the planet in these days.
Thank you for that message, and thank you for your heart clearly is in this, and your passion and your concern about the world. And I don't know if that's something that comes with age, because I increasingly feel that, more and more so. And I love the last message you said, that the answers really they're here within us and they're here amongst us. So, don't forget to think about looking at the human side of things and not just the technical side of things. We can't solve this through strategies and technical solutions. It's going to take all of us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure.